What makes wine worth waiting for? How much wine is produced in Greece? And what would surprise you about the wines of Greece? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in our chat with Konstantinos Lazarakis, author of the new book, The Wines of Greece. By the end of our conversation, you'll also discover the memorable situation that happened to Konstantinos while he was delivering a presentation to wine buyers in Russia. How the cult California wine Dominus ended up making an in-flight surprise for Konstantinos, what sparked his initial passion for Greek wine, why he wanted to become a master of wine when there were no others in Greece, what the key geographic features of Greece are and how they impact the wine you taste, what unexpected insights Konstantinos discovered while writing his book on Greek wines, what will surprise you about the dynamic nature of Greek wines and winemaking, and what it means for Greece to have a large number of indigenous grape varieties.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started.
Welcome to episode 322. I'm just back from a fabulous week in Las Vegas. I didn't gamble one dime, much to the chagrin of those roving floor managers who soon learned to ignore me, but I did take a chance on many terrific restaurants and shows. Yeah, that's not really a big risk. You know, the biggest concentration of master sommeliers in the United States is in Las Vegas. Well, it kind of competes with Disney, but it's just that concentration of top-notch restaurants. So I'll be dedicating an upcoming episode to my favorite restaurants and shows and other places in Sin City for wine and food lovers planning a getaway trip there. Meanwhile, on the Business News Network, BNN Bloomberg this week, I discussed dry January trends from the perspective of how the wine industry is reacting. I love digging into the business issues of wine. It kind of lights up my MBA brain. I used to work in high tech and marketing, so I love going into these issues. And so on the show, I noted that an increasing number of wineries in Canada and abroad are producing their own versions of low and no alcohol wines, especially with wine consumption decreasing among Gen Z in particular. And they're also introducing brands that have 0 grams of sugar or are low in calories. Much of the innovation in this category is happening within these product line extensions. Other wineries are strengthening their messaging related to organic and biodynamic viticulture, as well as sustainable and regenerative farming, though there's a lot of confusion over all those terms. More consumers than ever care about the environment as well as their own health. You can find my favorite low and no alcohol wines, spirits, beer, cocktails, and mixed drinks at nataliemclean.com/low-no. I'll also include that link in the show notes. I'll be posting reviews of these wines and their alcoholic cousins on Instagram at Natalie McLean Wine. That's at Natalie McLean Wine. Connect with me there. I'd love to hear from you about your own favorite low and no alcohol drinks, if you partake. Now, speaking of delicious wines, 2 of you will win the remaining bottles of wine that I have from Benziger Winery in Sonoma, California. We chatted with Chris Benziger last week, and he had some amazing stories to share about how his family pioneered biodynamic winemaking in California. Congratulations also to 2 winners of Chris Ruhlin's book, Press for Champagne, a guide to enjoying the world's greatest sparkling wine. They are Edie Cote from Quebec and Sean Smith from Barcelona. I still have 1 copy of Chris's terrific book to give away. 2 of you will also win copies of Konstantinos' new book, The Wines of Greece. All you have to do is email me and let me know you'd like to win. I'll choose 2 wine winners and 3 book winners randomly from those who contact me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. So hey, your chances are pretty great. You'll win something if you contact me. So lift that little finger and send me an email. All right, you know which finger I meant. In other bookish news, if you're reading the paperback or ebook or listening to the audiobook of my memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, a national bestseller and one of Amazon's best books of the year, I'd love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemclean.com. I'd be happy to send you beautifully designed, personally signed book plates for the copies you buy and/or give as gifts. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/322. The paperback usually arrives within a day or two of ordering, and the ebook and audiobook are instantly available through the magic of the internet. At the end of today's episode, I'm also including a bonus interview I did with Matt Cause on his podcast, Matt Talks Wine and Stuff, about the issues in the book. We go behind the scenes of the wine world to delve into what it's really like to work in this dream industry that's not always Skittles and Chardonnay. And by the way, that is a very terrible match. Do not try it. This is gravy, not the main meal, so feel free to keep listening if you're hungry for more or not. Okay, on with the show. All right, just before I introduce our guest, let me say that two of you are going to win a copy of his terrific book, The Wines of Greece. All you have to do is email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and tell me that you'd like to win a copy, and I'll choose two people randomly from those who contact me. Back to our guest, Konstantinos Lazarakis. You can correct me if I've got that mucked up.
It's Lazarakis, but I don't really care.
There we go. I should have brushed up on my Greek before we spoke, Konstantinos. He is the first person in Greece to have passed the notoriously difficult Master of Wine exams. He is also the author of The Wines of Greece, published by the Académie de Vin. As well, he serves as the president of Wines and Spirits, the Professional Center, general manager of Aeolus Wines, and CEO of Wine Wonders. And he joins us now from his home in Piraeus, Greece. Welcome, Konstantinos.
Well, thank you, Natalie. A big thank you out of my heart for having me here.
Oh, our pleasure.
It's very important for me, and I think your interest in Greek wines is something that might surprise some people, but really gives me huge delight being with you tonight.
I love Greek wines, and I want to learn more about them. I must admit, I don't know a lot, but I'm learning all the time, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
You will be getting a lot of bang for your bucks.
Excellent. I like to hear that. Good. We're of the same mindset here. So before we dive into your wine career, tell us about your previous life as a musician.
I started feeling myself. My what I call inner life started back in 1987. I was 14 years old and I started listening to heavy metal. I remember the first time, I think Scorpions' Blackout was an LP that one of my teachers was listening. I was staying close to him and I was walking past his window and I heard something that it was really intrusive, but at the same time exhilarating. Next day I said, what was that? Oh, that's Scorpions. That's not for you. You're too young for that. Then after a year I bought my first guitar and I fell in love with music. I'm still pretty much in love with music. I'm not playing the guitar anymore. I was dreaming about being a heavy metal star, but that didn't really go well.
Well, at least you got to start somewhere with a passion for something, and that can easily translate to other things, as of course it did. Do you think that fine wine and heavy metal share anything in common?
Well, if you dig, I'm pretty sure you can have a lot of differences. And especially, when you're a fan of Barolo, or since we're talking about the wines of Greece in here, Xinomavro, then these forms of wine are not immediately appealing, but hugely rewarding once you pay a bit of attention and you have been sort of calibrating your idea about what wine can be. The same could be said about heavy metal. It's appalling for most of the people out there. However, trust me on that, it can be very technical, very artistic, very theatrical, and all that. So We're living in the world where instant appeal is something that most people are looking for, whether they register that in their minds or not. But for me, looking beyond the instant is very rewarding. I have seen that in music, in wine, in books, in all sort of things.
Absolutely. And so we need to, in North America, and for me personally, need to get past the names of grapes and regions that may not be easy for us to pronounce, but the reward is, I mean, the wines I've tried from Greece are phenomenal. So we just need to get a bit more comfortable with them because they're great food wines too, all of which we'll get into. So tell us about one of your memorable wine moments, maybe when you were delivering a presentation in Russia.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. For many years, I have been doing a lot of work promoting Greek wines, meaning the wines of Greece. So I'm promoting Greek wines every single moment of my life. But for many years, I was traveling around the world, including the US and Canada, promoting Greek wines in specific sort of wine masterclasses organized by the Wines of Greece and local partners, of course. So at some point, it was St. Petersburg. We have been inviting a lot of people that were mainly involved in importing houses, buyers, because the penetration of Greek wines on that market was pretty minimal. So asking sommeliers to join us was pretty much enough because you were not having the wines available. So initially we wanted the buyers to be there, hopefully being impressed by the quality and then buy some stuff. And then at a later stage, we could do a bit of going around in restaurants and inviting sommeliers, which means that a lot of buyers were straight competitors.
Ah.
Of course, they were not really in big competition trying to grab that wine. I was pushing the notion that, Greek wine is a nice to have. It wouldn't be a must at that point. They were competitive mainly about different champagnes that were important, different French wines and, the big names. So there were quite a few competitors in the room. It was a very competitive spirit. And suddenly some people started talking from across the table. Then they stopped talking and they started shouting. And to cut a long story short, they started fighting. They
like
had
fist fighting?
Yes, fist fighting. And I was like,
at a wine event, I've never heard of it.
Yes, I was like, okay, now I've seen it all. I had tried to be in the middle, but not too much in the middle because, yes, that was above my pay grade. Some people tried to pull them apart. They failed initially, but then they succeeded. I was shocked. I mean, I was speechless.
Surely they weren't arguing over the wood grain and oak aging or something. What did you ever find out what they were arguing about?
No. Well, of course, everything happened in Russian, and my Russian is non-existent, so I had no idea. I was a bit scared to ask the people that were allowed to remain because they were removed from the room we're doing the masterclass. I mean, that was bizarre. That was
a masterclass in wine fist fighting. Yeah.
What can we say? It had a really bizarre theater or bizarre movie like a Monty Python scene, something like that. But, well, I have to say that after years and years of promoting Greek wine, not just me, but the producers, all the people out there, now I could almost imagine that two people would be getting in a fist fight to capture the best, the most desirable Greek wines.
Yes.
We're not no ones anymore.
I want that fighting spirit to come out in favor of Greek wines. Okay, so you tell us also about the time when you were leaving Napa Valley, the coveted winery of Dominus, which I think is owned by Chateau Petrus or Christian Noyer, before heading to the airport. What happened there?
Okay, those were the days. I mean, if anyone from the airport authorities of the world or the scanning machine producers listens to this, please do your best. Save us from this ordeal because past times were far better. Okay, there is an Institute of Masters of Wine symposium in Napa Valley, and then you mentioned that I am the managing director of Aeolos, which is an importing company, and we work with Christian Mouex. Jean-Pierre Mouex is the company. We work quite a lot, so we used to do Petrus, but then in 2013 they moved to Christian's brother, in distribution. We work with La Fleur Petrus, with Trottoir Noir, with Bel-Air Monange, but also we do Dominus and now Ulysses in Napa Valley. At that time, it was just Dominus. So I arrived there and we had to move appointments of some sort shortly beforehand. And it was me tasting at Dominus and then my car getting into the San Francisco airport and via Paris to Athens. So it was very last minute. So Cristiano X very kindly and opulently as possible, as usual, I was having 7 barrel samples to taste from the current vintage, and then he prepared 7 or 8 vertical of Dominus. So it was like 7 bottles, 50 cl bottles with a plastic screw top, and then several bottles of a vertical of Dominus. At the end of the tasting, I said, I have to leave. Oh, you're flying with Konstantinos, with Air France. And Christian looks shocked, like, oh, poor you. Or yeah, Air France wine is really bad. And
That's
he wasn't
shocking.
aware.
I would think it would be great, given how much wine is so important to their economy.
You're absolutely right. And he wasn't aware that I was flying economy. If he was thinking that where he flies wine is bad in Air France, then imagine the economy. And suddenly he takes all the small air bottles, 50 cl bottles, empties them in the spittoon, and then said, out of the vintages, which is your 7 favorite? And he started decanting the sort of like Dominus 88 and Dominus 83 in these ball bottles, get a sticker and gets the vintage on the sticker, grabs a bag and say, that's yours. That will get you through Athens. That was
Wow.
2004, where the liquid restrictions were not in place. That's why I'm begging all the airport authority officials or the scanning
reconsider.
machine producers to reconsider or do things faster. So I'm walking in, luggage check, everything. I'm walking with my hand luggage in place with all the Dominus. It was like 3.5 liters of Dominus. I was flying economy, but at that time, Air France, I'm not sure if they're around, they have one of these planes I was flying with, they have a little bump on the top, so it's 2 stories, and I was flying at the top, right at the back, really deep economy, really cheap economy ticket. At that time, they had business class and first class, and at first class, they had a sommelier.
Wow. An onboard sommelier. Oh, wow.
Onboard sommelier. So we take off San Francisco and I say, can I have a word with a sommelier? They go like, why? Because I want to have a chat with sommelier. And then after like half an hour, sommelier with raised eyebrow arrives by my seat and says, what can I do for you, sir? And I explain the situation. Then both eyebrows go up, says, give me a minute. And after like 10 minutes arrives, where is your bag on the overhead compartment, grabs it and says, follow me, sir. Instant upgrade, unfortunately not to first class, but to business class.
Well, that's pretty good. Wow.
On the condition that I would be sharing these bottles. I mean, it was a 13-hour flight. Well, even myself couldn't really drink all 3.5 liters of different vintages of
That's
Dominus.
one sly sommelier.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure that even the pilot might have, for sure, the pilots had a sniff. I'm not sure whether they had a sip.
Those were different days. Those are definitely different days.
Different days. Price-wise as well, because nowadays 3.5 liters of Dominus cost us half my car or something.
Oh, I know. That's a premium cult wine from Napa. Okay, so aside from living in Greece, what sparked your initial passion for Greek wines?
Greek wine is within the DNA of Greek people. Even if you don't think about wine, even if you know nothing about wine, we love Greek wine. If I can put, my 14-year-old Konstantinos passing by a window where the Scorpions Blackout LP was blasting out was
This
my
is when you were 14.
inner life. Then 7 years later, my 21st-year-old self was walking past a wine shop in Piraeus that wasn't there like a week ago. And I saw a bottle of wine that costed at that time 3,200 drachmas. That was because before the euro, so it was drachmas. That was 91.
I wonder how much that would be approximately in dollars.
Nowadays,
estimate.
it would be something like $7.
Oh,
$8.
$7. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
But at that time, from my 21-year-old self, from my social and financial backgrounds, my family's backgrounds, spending $7 on a bottle of wine was like, what?
Extravagant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you that rich? To give you an idea, when I was going with my family in a taverna, because that was the place we're going, spending $2 on a bottle of wine was pretty edgy. It was like right there with my limitations. So for me, it was eye-opening. So being very naive, if not audacious, I walk into the shop and I say, why this bottle costs that amount of money? So the poor guy says, well, I'm really sorry. Let me check whether I did something wrong. And it was something iffy with the invoice. Checks the invoice that he got the wine. Said, no, that's a price. Why? Well, I don't really know. I'm new in the business, but I'm having an open party. The winemaker is going to be there. So come, you're my invite. So yes, please show up and ask him all the questions you need. I walked into the shop at the opening party, some like a week after that, with my then girlfriend, now my wife. I was born married, and we have a chat with the winemaker. And I walked out of the shop feeling completely captivated. I bought a bottle of that wine. I still have it in my cellar, unopened. But I walked way back home, and I was talking with my wife, Tonia, and I said, bloody hell, I want to do that. At that time, I was studying mechanical engineering at the National Technical University of Athens, which is pretty much the top of the tree for Greek universities. I mean, it's not Stanford, but it's pretty damn good. And moving into the world of wine was something extremely risky. But I was fortunate because I had my parents really not caring what I do, but sticking to me, feeling happy to doing that. Antonia was immensely supportive. Heavy metal career was not very supportive. So actually, my hopes on becoming a heavy metal megastar were going down exactly at the time that my sort of wine hopes were picking up.
I think that's good. I think you made the right choice.
Yeah, well, I hope the wine believes the same thing.
I'm sure it does. And then, so what made you want to become a master of wine? Because there were none in your country. So was it just that desire to keep learning?
That happened when I was 21. I started learning more and more about wine. And by the age of 24, I knew a few things about wine, but I was quite an anomaly, statistical anomaly, a 24-year-old boy that is interested into wine. At that time, we had some clubs that they were doing not master classes, tastings. It was more like a booze up with people that, what was the South Park quote? Wine tasting is like getting drunk, but it seems more classy. I think that was, yeah. I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to even say the word South Park in this podcast.
Oh, that's fine. Yes.
So I got involved into a club, and there was a guy that was selling glasses, started a company selling wine glasses to restaurants. And there was a very famous and very expensive, for the time, restaurant in place called Bajazzo. It was owned by a German that was the ex-head chef of Shah of Persia. So Shah of Persia was kicked out by Persia, by Iran, I think back in 1977. So he started a restaurant in Amsterdam, then moved to Greece, Athens, and said, I need a sommelier. No one ever had a sommelier before that guy. No one was asking for a sommelier before 1994. And the guy selling glasses said, okay, Klaus Feuerbach was the chef's name. I have someone that might do the trick. So as I am the first Greek sommelier back in 94. There were, of course, people working as waiters that were keen on wine and, doing things with wine. But the word sommelier, inochos, the one who pours the wine, is the proper ancient Greek word. It was me back in 94. I was something like a poster boy for the wine industry doing this thing, but I was revolted by the fact that most people in Greece had no idea about wine. And we have an expression in Greece, I'll try to translate it. It's who you declare yourself to be. So if I've been in Bordeaux one time and I had a Grand Cru Burgundy a couple of times, I was an expert. I was a self-proclaimed expert. And then I could do consulting, I could do wine listings, restaurants, I could do everything I wanted to be. At that time, we had only a winemaking school, university actually, in Greece. But learning how to make wine is something mildly different from selling wine, communicating wine, or understanding what's the difference between Napa Valley and, Sonoma. So I said, I want to be something about wine. And it shouldn't be winemaking because I had getting dirty and then moving around places every other vintage. And then I wanted to do something that would be calibrating my standard. I would be going out and saying, I want to be this. I managed to achieve that level. Low, high, I don't care. So the winemaker that I met back in 91 said, I export wines around US and UK, and they say that, there is a qualification called Master of Wine that is very prestigious. So I go, okay, I'll try and sign me up. Yeah. I went off and I started living in London. How little I knew, I almost said to my wife, Tonya, keep the bed warm, darling. I'm in London and within a few months I'll be back. And then I moved to London and I had a big slap mark over my cheeks of the first couple of weeks. I was like, that will take a lot of time. So I lived in London for 5 years. At that time, living in London was possibly the only thing that could save you from zeroing your chances of passing the MW. Still, London is a beautiful place for wine lovers. At that time, I was tasting about 1,000 wines a week.
Wow,
can you imagine?
1,000 wines a week. My God, didn't you get tired?
No, I'm sorry. 1,000 wines a month.
It was 250. Okay, still. That's still a lot of wine.
I mean, I was living in Notting Hill at that time,
Beautiful
where it was possible for people like me living in Notting Hill. And by walking distance, either a Saturday or a Sunday, you could visit 6, 7 places, wine shops. And every single shop would be having 5, 6, 10 wines that would be open for people to taste, walk in, taste, buy a case, and you get, 1 bottle for free. And after a bit of time, people knew me. I was the Greek widow that was trying to become a master of wine. And they were opening bottles that I wanted to taste. Never had a Chenin from Loire. Okay, Konstantinos, let me open one for you. Then, it was Australia Day tastings. Within a day, you could do easily 100 wines. So I cannot do that anymore. Well,
that's quite the journey. So we should move on to Greece, of course.
Yes, let's stick it to Greece.
Yes. So let's just paint a visual map. I think most people know where Greece is, but just very quickly, where is Greece on the map and what are the neighboring countries?
You are having Europe. And then you are having the Balkan Peninsula right towards the east, and a little piece that is the sort of ending point of the Balkan Peninsula, which essentially is between Italy and Turkey. Some people say that this is the case culturally as well. This is Greece. Greece is a very complex in a topographic level country. There are many reasons about that. And is surrounded by sea, bar the north side. And we're having, I think, per square kilometers, we have the longest beach coastline as a country around the world, or very close to the top. It's a pretty bizarre country. So it's Greece, Mediterranean Sea, southern part and east part of Europe, close to Turkey, but not quite close.
Okay. There are about 700 wineries. About how much does Greece produce a year? Like, we have about 800 wineries in Canada. So I'm wondering if it's kind of the same in terms of production. Approximately how much do they produce?
Walking around in wine exhibitions or wine shows around the world, and I see a number of people, even wine professionals, have a widely different expectations of what Greek wine is. Some people are surprised that Greece is producing any wine. That happened to me, and someone could say that this is even more bizarre than the fist fight in the St. Petersburg I've witnessed. And we have other people that think that Greek wine is sort of commodities, a country that produces quite a bit of wine. So prepare to be shocked, I think, but Bordeaux produces about 2 times the wine that the entire Greek nation, Greek country is producing. Just one region in France, arguably a big
The whole
region,
country. My
produces
goodness.
2 times. This is a message that I would like to get across tonight. If you're having a bottle of Greek wine in your cellar, or if you can walk to a wine shop and buy a bottle of wine from Greece, you are buying a very rare wine. A very rare wine. We're buying a bottle of Bordeaux, and we think that that's rare. No, it's not rare.
No, there's like 10,000 producers in Bordeaux, and
Yes.
we're talking 700 wineries in Greece. So it is artisanal and small and, yeah, as you say, rare.
It's getting even weirder, I think. We are exporting only 10% of our production.
Okay.
We drink our wine, and then tourists coming in are thirsty for our wine. So we export just 10% of what we produce. We export basically because we crave for that mid-December visit to New York to pretend we're working while we're enjoying the festive season. So it's a very different mentality. So very tiny production. But you said the artisan scale quote, and that's very important. I mean, we are buying a bottle of, I'll use a Greek-related winery. So Corinne Mentzelopoulos will not be very aggressive towards me. We're talking about Chateau Margaux. And people pay a lot of money to buy a bottle of Chateau Margaux, which is a gorgeous wine, it's fantastic, mythical wine, and they think they're buying something rare. No, they're not. You go to Osaka, you go to Rio de Janeiro, you go to US, any city that drinks wine in the US, and you have 2, 5, 10 restaurants at least that sell Chateau Margaux because they are producing 200,000 bottles a year. There are very few quality Greek wines, that even wineries, that are as much. There are only 10 estates in Greece that reach the average land holding of hectares in France. We are tiny.
Tiny. Tiny's good, though. So what was the most unexpected insight you discovered while you were writing the book?
It was, all sort of things. Grape varieties that I've never had, grape varieties that were up and coming, producers that had, after I started digging in, a completely different background from what I had in my mind. The world of wine in Greece is old and new at the same time. We have mechanical engineers, we have marble producers, we have artists falling in love in wine and saying, yeah, let's do that. But because it's a very vibrant stage, we don't pay enough attention to the stories before these people landed wine. These stories are important because they are, as you said, artisan scale. We don't have the magnets of what you see in places like California. people that they made their fortune to A, and then they think that moving to B, meaning wine, is something fancy, is a lifestyle, and it will look great on their personal, LinkedIn accounts. It's more humane, should I say.
Lots of people stories. And what's a surprising piece of wine-related trivia or a piece of history relating to wine in Greece that you think that even seasoned wine professionals would not know?
Okay, how much time do you have?
Short answer, so we can get through this.
Okay, the great thing about Greek wine is that we have no idea what Greek wine is all about. We are having new grape varieties, new regions emerging by the vintage. I'll give you an example. Malagousia. Malagousia is a great grape variety, and then we have about 200 producers producing
Is it
either a
red or
single
white?
vineyard. It's a white. It's white.
Okay.
For me, is an extremely forthcoming yet very complex grape variety. It's quite intense on the nose. It can range from muscatty to minty to tropically. On the palate, manages to be quite round, even, creamy, without the need of extended lees contact or oak, but still it has that amazing freshness. So, be surprised, back in 1993, we had the first varietal Malagousia, the first wine called Malagousia in the world, in Greece, in wherever you might be caring to call. So, one of the most important grape varieties has been around for, how long was that? Like 30, 40 years. That is bound to happen again and again and again. You're going to Italy, and pretty much every area that can make wine does, or is verified as not very exciting. Grape varieties, they have the whole thing sorted out by now. It's highly unlikely that you will see a new up-and-coming grape variety coming up from Austria. Georgia, maybe Georgia. In Greece, I'm pretty sure that if we are good to our health and we do this thing in 20 years, I hope you're around doing these magnificent projects, then I'm pretty sure at that time I can come up with 3, 4, 5 names of grape varieties or regions that I have no idea as we speak.
And yet these are ancient varieties, like they've been around, like they were discovered 30 years ago, but they've been in Greece for a long time, right?
Okay, I'm repeatedly calling Greece Jurassic Park for Vitis vinifera.
Ah.
2 ways: the genetic complexity across clones of the same variety and the genetic complexity across varieties is phenomenal. I'll give you an example. Italy is producing 55 more wine than we do. So Italy is a giant when compared to what we're producing in a year. Italy, 55 times larger vineyard, has about 1,000 grape varieties. We are having 250 that are commercially available, close to that. We have about 70 that are up and coming, so we are having more than 300. So the packing of DNA diversity is mind-blowing in Greece. Also, what is really bizarre, it can be explained by the topography, is that we are having a lot of grape varieties, and 99.9% of these grape varieties are endemic. Endemic is a Greek word meaning found only in one place. So you stroll around Europe, because the topography is a bit more flat and the exchange was a bit different over the centuries, and you have that grape, geographic, in Hungary, and you have people saying Blaufränkisch in Austria, and then we do a DNA profiling, although the name was pretty similar anyway, and you discover that geographic is the same thing with Blaufränkisch, primitive with Zinfandel. The bizarre thing about Greek Vitis vinifera database is that very few grape varieties have been doing anything significant in the neighboring countries. We're having a lot of grape varieties in Italy bearing Greek names, Aglianico, which means Hellenic or Hellas, Greece, or Greco di Tufo. We know that these are not related. There were other reasons that got a Greek-sounding name, because in the ancient days, the Greek wines were the famous. So if a grape was good, they were saying, oh, Greco, that's Greco. Like we're drinking good sparkling wine, and we say this is champagne. So it's really a very old mixer of DNA, of Vitis vinifera, coupled with the great concept about consuming wine, celebrating wine that Greeks had at least the last 5 millennia. So it's work in progress. We're starting with something with a very raw diamond. Still, I believe it's a raw diamond. We're getting into polishing pieces, but still we have so much to discover.
That's exciting.
And that was a short answer, okay?
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Konstantinos. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, what makes wine worth waiting for? As Konstantinos observes, when you're a fan of Barolo, or since we're talking about the wines of Greece, Sinamorovo, then these wines are not immediately appealing, but hugely rewarding once you pay attention to them and calibrate your idea of what wine can be. The same could be said about heavy metal music. It's appalling for many people, he says. However, it can be very technical, very artistic, very theatrical. So we're living in a world where instant appeal is what most people want, whether they register that in their minds or not. But for Konstantinos, looking beyond the instant is rewarding. He has observed this in music, wine, books, and many things. I'd add people to that list as well, especially when it comes to relationships. Number 2, how much wine is produced in Greece? Konstantinos says that many people, even wine professionals, have widely different expectations of what Greek wine is. Some are surprised that Greece is producing any wine at all, while others believe that Greek wine is a commodity produced in massive bulk. But, as he notes, the Bordeaux region of France produces twice the amount of wine as the entire country of Greece. And number 3, what would surprise you about the wines of Greece? Konstantinos explains that the great thing about Greek wine is that we have no idea what Greek wine is all about. No baggage, I guess you could say. New grape varieties and regions emerge regularly. For example, Malagousia is a grape variety produced by about 200 vineyards. It's extremely forthcoming, yet very complex and intense. On the nose, it can range, he says, from muscatine to minty to tropically. On the palate, it's quite round, even creamy, without the need of extended lees contact or oak, but still, it has this amazing freshness. This is one of the most important Greek varieties, and yet it's only been around for about 30 or 40 years. And that's bound to happen again and again, he notes. In Italy, by contrast, almost every area that can make wine does, or is at least verified, and they've identified all of their grape varieties. So there's a lot of excitement in the future for Greece. In the show notes, you'll find the full transcript of my conversation with Konstantinos, links to his website and books, the video versions of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live, and where you can order my book online now, no matter where you live. If you missed episode 114, go back and take a listen. I chat about great wines for Valentine's Day. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite. I had thought that a mass tasting would help me better understand the style of this year's crop, but what's hitting me hardest is how alcoholic these wines are. I'm already feeling hot under the collar with just a few samples. Don't get me wrong, though. I like alcohol. It makes me happy and stops me from being the tightly wound control freak as some people so unjustly characterize me. After we've shared a few glasses, I forgive these people. I'm so benevolent. Increasingly, though, I find that many wines today are too potent. To me, it's simply alien when a Pinot Noir tastes like port, or I have to put it in the fridge before drinking it to numb the alcoholic heat. If I just wanted booze, I'd have a martini. But I drink wine for its taste, so the last thing I need is a blowtorch finish of bathtub gin. And now here's the bonus interview with Matt Cause on his podcast. We explore topics such as Which wine should you pair with artichokes? That was definitely a warm-up question. What inspired me to write Wine Witch on Fire? How did the events in that year kick off my no good, very bad, terrible vintage, personally and professionally? Have there been any lasting effects from these traumatic events? How has the wine industry evolved over the past 10 to 20 years? What are my thoughts on the current state of the wine review industry? You won't want to miss next week when we continue our chat with Konstantinos, and we'll also have part 2 of my conversation with Matt. If you liked this episode or learned even one teensy tiny thing from it, please email or tell a friend about the podcast this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in learning more about Greek wines or even discovering them. It's easy to find my podcast. Just tell them to search for Natalie McLean Wine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, their favorite podcast app, or they can listen to the show on my website at nataliemclean.com/podcast. Email me if you have a sip tip question, if you'd like to win one of 2 copies of Konstantinos' book, the remaining copy of Chris's champagne book, the remaining 2 bottles of Benziger wine, or if you've read my book or are listening to it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Were you surprised about Greek wines? Have you tried any? Have you discovered a favorite? Email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. In the show notes, you'll also find a link to take a free online food and wine pairing class with me called The 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix Them Forever at nataliemclean.com/class. And that's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/322. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week, perhaps a delicious Malagousia wine from Greece.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Matt Talks Wine and Stuff with Interesting People podcast. And I'm joined by the second time by James Beard Foundation Journalism Award winner. It is Natalie McLean, her new book, Wine Witch on Fire. Good morning, Natalie. Thanks for being on the pod.
It is great to be back here with you, Matt.
Yeah, I don't know why I said good morning. When someone listens to this, it could be in the afternoon, but there
it's
we are.
It's where we're at. It's why we're not drinking yet.
Yes, yeah. At 8:30 in the morning, though the taste buds are quite alive. That would be a little
aggressive. They are primed, but I'm not
Yeah.
right now. I don't know about you.
No, absolutely not. I'm just finishing coffee. There is so many things to get in this book. Serious stuff, fun stuff, relationship stuff, drinking while watching Tina Fey. I don't even know the best spot to begin, so I'm going to go on a very small thing. Early in the book, you talk about artichokes. For people listening, what wine would you pair with artichokes?
Right. So I'm glad we're starting with the most important thing first. So, Matt, with steak, you have protein, which loves to glom onto the tannins in wine. It's that furry mouth feeling that you get, if you're eating walnuts or oversteeped tea. However, with green vegetables like artichoke and to a certain extent asparagus, they tend to be the stuff of sommeliers' nightmares. They have an organic compound called cynarin. And what that does is it stimulates our taste buds' sweet sensors or sugar receptors. And it fools us into thinking that everything we drink or eat after we've eaten artichokes or asparagus actually tastes sweeter than it is. So you can imagine the havoc it wreaks on artichokes and sommeliers' professional careers. So they really distort wine. So what you want in a wine is one that's bone dry with lots of crisp acidity so that even if it gets softened and you get a little perception of sweetness, it doesn't taste flabby or cloying. So think Austrian Gruner Veltliner, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, all your nice crisp whites.
Perfect. Because this could be like a heavy conversation, I just want to start somewhere light, but
of course, let's warm up.
What made you decide to write this book? Because so many wine books are a little bit personal. Yours is really personal, about your divorce, about raising your child, about dating, about drinking too much, about trying to handle all that. Like, this book is both, and I would recommend this to anyone, this book is both very serious, very personal, also like there's a lot of fun in it as well. But what made you decide to do it?
Well, the events in this book took place 10 years ago, as you know, having read it, Matt. But I think the themes and the issues are more relevant today. But for the first 5 years after my no good, terrible, very bad vintage, personally and professionally, I couldn't even look at the notes that I had taken. I locked them away for 5 years and thought, I can't deal with this. So many years of therapy later, and with the healing of time, I was able to look at them again. But what really prompted me was that I was hearing a lot of stories from women in the wine industry. You touched on a lot of the personal issues, but of course there was a professional inciting incident, which I'm sure we'll get to. And their specifics, the specifics of what had happened to them were different, but the issues and the feelings were the same. And it wasn't just women in the wine industry. It was women in tech and finance and sport and the military. We're still hearing all of those stories. So I just thought, maybe it's time to talk about it. I've been in this industry for more than 20 years, and there are a lot of young women who cannot talk about these things for fear of damaging their career. Because the wine industry, as you know, Matt, is a very close-knit, pun intended, very tight social grapevine. Word gets around very quickly and you can be ostracized, as I was. And so I thought, well, you know what? You can't kill me twice. At least I hope not. And I think that if I tell my story, it might be helpful to someone else. I know the cliche, feel less alone. But I guess, when my family asked, why on earth are you writing about this? I love what Glennon Doyle, the memoirist Glennon Doyle, said, write from a scar, not an open wound. So you need the lens of time to make sense of what happened. But they said, okay, you got the scars now, you've done the healing. I love what poet Sean Doherty said, because somewhere, someone out there right now has a wound in the exact shape of your words.
Was it difficult for you to go back to those notes after not looking at them for so many years?
It was. They've done studies, and this is in the book as well. They've taken MRI brain scans of people who've been in a near fatal car incident or accident. I'm not equating what happened to me as that, but the science is interesting. So they read them a script of what happened in that car accident, and they're monitoring the brain, and it's lighting up in the same areas as actually being in the incident. So they're not remembering it, they're reliving it. And so to go back into the events took an emotional toll. But again, through the amazing power of time and healing, you can pull back from that and start to reflect on what happened, because no one wants a misery dump as a memoir. That's not useful to anyone, including the author. No one wants a revenge book. The healing's not done if you're trying to do revenge with a book. What people want is something they can take away for themselves. So again, their story might be different, but how did you come out of it? How did you articulate those feelings I'm having trouble articulating? In the end, a good memoir is not what happened to you, it's what you did with it.
And certainly having that time, that perspective, then allows you to attack it from a different angle. And you bounce around through all the things. It's not just one or two chapters. There's flashbacks and then, more present day stuff. So let's talk about late 2012. And also I enjoyed in the book early on, you did a thing, X amount of hours until your world implodes. I thought that was a good technique. Back in 2012, there was accusations levied against you, against the website. Initially, the words plagiarism, it became issues about copyright. I was wondering, just first from your perspective to the listeners who don't know, what happened?
Sure. Well, it was just before Christmas, so this is a heartwarming holiday tale, not so much, but there is, as you said, there is humor. Again, no one can withstand reading something that is just a downer all the way. So I call it my nightmare before Christmas, but I was checking my email one last time before going to bed when a Google alert popped up in my inbox. And the headline was, Natalie McLean, world's best wine writer or content thief. And my jaw and my heart just dropped to the floor, to the extent that, I felt like the text was blurring in and out And I was thinking, what the hell, where did this come from? And I clicked through to a large American wine site, and there was a long rant. And at first, you're just responding emotionally. So it's just phrases burning into my retina. And it wasn't simply a nasty post, Matt. It was, I was being accused of the one thing a writer dreads most. Doctors lose their license for malpractice, lawyers get disbarred for misrepresentation. Writers, we get our careers canceled for copyright attribution. And the accusation, as you mentioned, was not about plagiarism, but rather about fair use in quoting other wine reviews to provide more context about a wine, which is what I was doing, just as Rotten Tomatoes, the movie site, provides lots of critic reviews on the movie. But people confuse the two concepts, but there's a huge difference legally, and we won't go down that legal rabbit hole. So I was the first to comment on the blog post. I explained that I was already changing the way that I attributed reviews, as it wasn't something that had been brought to my attention in the past, nor did they contact me about it, this website, this American site, though they did manage to contact a wide range of other wine writers in the weeks before when they were writing the post for comment. And so I naively thought that if I explained what I was doing and how I was fixing the reviews, that would be the end of it. I was really wrong about that and a lot of other things. So their accusation ignited the debate online, but the bonfire really escalated when the commenters started to attack me as a woman. And it devolved into taking my body apart piece by piece and commenting on it. And this was at the time when I was just removing all of the reviews wholesale, just delete them, even though I was not asked to do that. And some would say, just ignore it. My God, turn off the internet. But when you earn your living online, you can no more turn off the internet than like a surgeon can perform surgery outside the hospital. So daily I drank the venom, and the frenzy carried on.
Yeah, first, all the parts of anything dealing with your body or Photoshop, absolutely gross and just unnecessary, and also something that we still see today. It's the darkest side of the internet. But as you said, your job is you're Natalie McLean. It's the website. And so, no, you would not be able to get off of it. What were the things that maybe when it came to Canadian copyright laws, what were things maybe you got wrong?
Oh, so many things. This ignorance is never a defense of violating a law, but in this case, I had not violated any law. I enrolled originally in an MBA, LLB, law degree, business degree at Western, dropped the law degree, finished the MBA. But by the time this thing was finished, I feel like I had my law degree with a specialty in copyright. In any case, what I got wrong was that what happened is I got another Google alert about a year before this one that started everything. And it was a Google alert about one of my wine reviews being posted on another wine site. And I thought, that's interesting, because they had been in touch with me and asked me to be part of their wine site, put my reviews on theirs. And I declined politely because I thought, well, why are people going to come to my wine site if you are posting my reviews as well? So anyway, so then I was really curious, well, why are they posting my wine reviews when I declined? And I went over to their website, looked, and there was more than a dozen of my reviews on there. And then it twigged. I thought, oh, they're copying all of my reviews that are on the LCBO, the Provincial Liquor Board site, because they publish all of our reviews, all the writers' reviews on their site with each vintage's review and other instances too. So I thought, oh, well, okay, this is a government site posting wine reviews from other sites or from other writers. It must be in the public domain. That was mistake number one. That does not mean it's automatically in the public domain. The second mistake was, oh, this wine site is publishing all of them, repurposing them, quoting them, whatever, however you want to put it. I should be able to do that too. Wrong. Just because somebody else is doing something doesn't mean you could do it. You should check into it. I learned that. And so those were the two biggest mistakes. A third was the LCBO at the time was using initials to quote reviews. I started doing that as well because I already had a directory, a legend where I explained all kinds of things, because there was like 36 pieces of information for every wine. People were going to mobile, like from ABV, average like alcohol level, etc. Anyway, that didn't necessarily mean it was okay either. So net, those were all the mistakes. I got legal help from a copyright expert, and his take was, you're in the bounds of copyright. We call it fair dealing in Canada. They call it fair use in the United States. There's a bunch of exceptions under the law for copyright. If you're quoting something for education, criticism, review, short passages, etc., it was in the bounds of that. It was legal. But still, I misunderstood so many things about what I was doing. I didn't look into it when I should have. I did, in the end, remove them all, but that was kind of where it all snowballed.
Yeah, so a lot of it's spirit of the law versus letter of the law. How much easier would all of this have been if many, many years ago when this all started, if the people that wrote the initial article had contacted you and explained where maybe you were making mistakes and finding a solution beyond what happened?
Well, it would have been a heck of a lot easier for me. For them, I don't know. I mean, the article generated the most comments they ever had, so maybe they were pleased with the SEO value and the clickbait. But for me, like, there were so many layers to this. I had been a contributor to this wine site in the past, but it had been many years since I had contributed. There was no acrimony. I just hadn't contributed in a while. But they had my contact. They had me still on their masthead on the website. And Patrick Fagan, who was the wine columnist for the Chicago Tribune, commented on this post, said, I noticed Natalie is on your masthead. Could this not have been handled in-house? And the editor at the time of the site said, we stand by our comments, and didn't answer his question. So yeah, it would have been a lot easier, a lot less grief, and a lot less misunderstanding. But I promised myself after this never to try to mind read. So I don't know. I guess that's not what they were looking for.
I still want to move on. I wanted to get, because this is a big part of your book. I mean, this is right in the central part. Do you still feel the effects of it today? Do you still feel any sort of, is there still negative things today from what happened then?
Just the physical effects. So at the time this happened, in about 11 days, I lost about 14 pounds, which is not a good thing to do. But also I developed a heart murmur, and that stays with me today. So that didn't go away. And, I got, the heart monitor tests, EKG and ECG. I always mix them up. One's for brain, one's for heart. But that developed and remains with me. And I only bring that up not to say, oh, poor little me, but to say that words do have real, tangible, physical impact. We can't dismiss them as sticks and stones will break my bones. That is the lasting impact. The other thing is that, and I remain in therapy, and I would anyway. I'm a big believer in therapy. But, there's always a trepidation if somebody says, I've been very fortunate in terms of, since the book has come out, the response has been resoundingly positive. But there was always that trepidation of, it just takes one thing and then it's going to snowball again. So you always have that somewhere inside you going like, when is it going to happen again? Unfortunately.
Now that this is more of a scar and not a wound, which, by the way, that is a really good quote. That is a really good way of dealing with things. It says a lot and not a lot of words. Not the people that said personal attacks and not anything visual, not any of that disgusting stuff. Can you understand why some people would have been upset at the time, people that were the vanguard for journalism?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And part of the memoir is, you have to be toughest on yourself and realize, why were you so blind to this? And as I explain in Wine Witch on Fire, I was competitive, I was perfectionistic, but I was also on my high horse. I thought real journalism was about long-form narrative, the long stories. I thought wine reviews were like the throwaway stuff, like recipes of the food world. And so I didn't respect my own enough. I didn't respect others enough because I didn't care about them. I just thought it's like yesterday's newspaper. Who cares? So I overlooked the importance that wine reviews have for many, or certainly a number of wine writers. That's what they do. But I also overlooked the importance to consumers. What's more of service? Giving someone a weekly shopping list of wines to buy, or giving them a book that's lyrical and whatever, beautifully written. I mean, I think the greatest service journalism are the wine reviews now. But it sure took me a while to come around to that, to have my Damascene moment of falling off my high horse and realizing, hey, there's a place for this. And not only do you need to respect the wine reviews of others, but you need to respect their use to consumers, and you need to start respecting your own work, your own wine reviews, and not just toss away.
That is fascinating. I guess maybe just your background, you're going into law and big tech and you're doing all these huge high-minded things. So I can understand. It's like, well, it's a wine review. It's there for fun and figuring out the acidity and what to pair it with. Okay, moving from that, there's a lot of other serious stuff I want to talk about. But first, Natalie, I'm very angry at you. There's one thing in your book, Wine Witch on Fire, you don't reveal. Early on, you say you're having that horrible dinner with your ex-husband at your local restaurant, and you write, I'm having my favorite Pinot Noir. You never said what your favorite Pinot Noir was.
I just thought it would damage the brand to besmirch it in such a negative situation. No, just kidding. No. It's 30 Bench Pinot Noir from Niagara. I love it. I still drink it. Pinot Noir, I opened the book with, a wine label that I made up, Dwayne McLean, and compare a book, the writer's voice, to terroir in wine. I find there's many similarities, but the wine was 30 Bench Pinot Noir. Emma Garner, winemaker, rock star.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, Benchlands. I mean, God, what we do. Actually, you know what? Off topic. Your first book, if I remember correctly, you were down you were at DRC, correct?
Yes. Domaine Romani Conti in Burgundy. Yes.
Yeah. So I am not comparing what he does with Ontario. Let me say that on the front end. But this is a long way of me saying, when you compare the quality of the Ontario Pinots and Chards today that you review in 2024 versus when you got started, can you tell some sort of qualitative difference between where it was 20 years ago versus now?
Oh, yeah. It's a revolution. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, there's so many changes that have happened, from, new technology to techniques to knowing our soil and climate better, to the international stages all these young winemakers go in, and, the knowledge pool. So much has changed. And my favorite Pinot Noir remains 30 Bench because I don't have a trust fund for drinking DRC every weekend. But when we stand shoulder to shoulder with Pinot Noirs around the world, our Pinots could be double or triple the price for the quality that we produce.
Don't say that out loud.
I know. Edit that out, please.
Yeah, that's the part I'm going to edit out. No, but it's true. I tell everyone all the time, if you can't afford Premier Cru Burgundy, I mean, I had the 70th birthday for a girlfriend's father. I brought a Gravity Flat Rock Cellars Pinot Noir,
awesome.
Because of, just how good that all is. All right. So I just needed to ask you about that.
Okay. Glad we cleared that up.
Yes. Thank you. What is life like as a wine reviewer in terms of how much travel, how much wine, how much ridiculous amount of time you're spitting wine before lunch?
So I know the palate is best in tasting in the morning, but I can't do that. I save morning times for writing when my brain is at its best. I am a morning person. So I will taste late afternoon before dinner. That's when I do my tasting. So in terms of number of wines, average maybe 30, 35 wines. I mean, I get samples every day. People think, oh, poor little you, tiny little violin. But it is a job, and you're trying to be analytical. It's the difference, Matt, like if a movie critic goes to see a movie, they're not just sitting back and taking it in. They're making notes on the plot and the character development and the narrative arc and whatever. So it is work. It's analysis, but I enjoy it, obviously. So that's when and how much I'm tasting. Travel-wise, I've always been a homebody, a hermit. I love being in my home office, and I love writing more than traveling. So my travel, I really space out because I like to be able to have the time to digest what I've seen and done and then to write about it. I can't really, I'll make notes when I'm on the road, but the actual creating the article really happens at home. So therefore, I probably don't travel near as much as a lot of other writers do. And it's just my natural introversion, shyness. I really just don't like being out there.
The state of wine review right now, as you said, when you had your own revelation about how important it is that wine reviewers can have a great amount of impact. And we've seen influences on wines and, 95 points. It's a big question to ask, but just right now, your thoughts on the state of the wine review industry.
There's so many more voices now, which I think is a good thing. Everyone needs to find their person. So if you follow someone, you think, oh, every time he or she says violets in a Pinot Noir, I know I'm going to buy that one, no matter what they score it or whatever. You need to find your person. And now there's so many more people. So yeah, it's more democratic. It's not just the newspaper columnists. Those are a dying breed anyway. Although there's several that remain very well respected. So you've got your Instagram influencers, you've got your people who review on wine sites like I do. Still, you've got magazines. There's just more choice. I think that's a good thing. And I think you need to just figure out who your person is.
I'm going to be more pointed. My last question was horrible. It was you could have spent 4 hours on it. That one's on me. Like in terms of me with wine reviews, it's such a different world than you are. My rule is, and also I serve a very different sort of audience. I only post the positive reviews. I always tell anyone who sends me wine, if I tried and don't like it, I'm not going to say a word. And no one will know unless it's a crazy chemical sugar bomb where I'm like, maybe don't drink that wine. But that's my philosophy because for me, wine, I'm just doing it more on the joy side. But I'm a tourist. I'm not as hardcore into it as you are. How is it for you in terms of how do you feel when you've been sent wines and you're like, this is nowhere near varietally correct?
So I used to think, am I going to be like Robert Parker, the US critic, who modeled himself after Ralph Nader, who was a consumer advocate for cars? I think wine and cars are just cannot be comparable. But anyway, again, early on and still to today, I don't view my role as a hardcore critic. I just don't. I'm a writer, and along with the writing goes some recommendations. And so what I decided fairly early on was I'm not going to write about bad wines either. And why is that? It's not in service to the wineries, actually. It is in service to my readers. They do not need a really long list of bad wines to remember to not buy. I'm recommending hundreds, thousands of wines that are great and worthy of their attention and pocketbook. I also had to get over my own biases. Early on, I wasn't a fan of Gewürztraminer, and I write things like, well, if you like Gewürztraminer, and people start saying, what do you mean if you like Gewürztraminer? I like Gewürztraminer. So you have to get past your personal prejudices, including wines that have a lot of residual sugar or whatever. Like there seems to be bias sometimes against wines that are sweet, but there's a whole lot of people who love those wines. Maybe I don't drink them in my personal time, but that doesn't mean I need to slam them for being sweet. They are what they are. And would they appeal to people who like that style, but don't put it that way? But that's why I just don't. Like if people ask me, I'm about to, I'm going to add to my vertical collection of, this bottle that's $300 every year. What would you rate it? I'll tell them, hey, 88, that's a signal. Don't buy it. But other than that, you know what? I feel like it's stepping on caterpillars on the sidewalk. Why bother? There's just so many butterflies to say, look, those are worth your attention.
It's a good point. Life is short.
Life is very short.
You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.